Hello, and welcome back to our study through the Gospel of Matthew. Tonight we are going to take a look at the last half of chapter 6. So we'll finish chapter 6, and then actually we'll continue on through the first part of Matthew chapter 7. And the reason that I'm doing that, and I try to break up these teachings just kind of according to a thematic chunk, and kind of keep things together in that sense, just to make it easier to think about. So we just kind of process one idea, one big picture idea at a time. I find that's helpful when I'm studying through the scriptures, to kind of see where the thematic breaks are, and kind of pause there and go back and reread that section, and really get a sense of how the Holy Spirit is speaking to me as I'm studying that passage. But I'm going to say this from time to time. I think overall, the wonderful people who made it so much easier for us to navigate through the Bible by placing things into chapters and adding verse numbers in there so that we can find things a lot faster. You can imagine having a Bible that didn't have those, and trying to find, find that one spot in the middle of Jeremiah where he's talking about this, right? And then we're flipping through. So it's, what a gift that was. And I think for the most part, they did a wonderful job of putting chapter breaks and section breaks in where they should be. But there are a few places here and there where I just disagree with where they chose to end maybe a thought. And so I've kind of broken up some things. And as I've been studying and rereading over and over and over again, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and I talked about this at the end of the last video, that I strongly suspected that it was a chiasm. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, a few videos back, I just talk about chiasms for 30 minutes. So go and watch that. And so I spent some time just really going through verse by verse, backwards and forwards through this, what's called the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and looking to see is the way that Matthew has presented this teaching, this continuous teaching from Yeshua, from Jesus, is this in a form that it's paralleling from beginning to end, and working towards both forward and backwards towards a centerpiece. And I strongly suspected the answer is yes. Today, I feel very confident in saying yes. I feel like I've got an outline now for it all, and I can't wait to show you that next time. We'll talk about that next time. It just really just blew my mind when I saw it, and realized as I started to then, and for some people watching, why do you even, why would someone waste their time? Because it could seem like a waste of time to try to analyze and scrutinize sort of the literary design. Can't we just enjoy the teaching? Absolutely. And I just discovered this in the last week. Suspected that it was a chiasm, and then confirmed that it was a chiasm. I've been reading and rereading the Gospel of Matthew for over 20 years, and I have gotten so much from the text, so much of this, and this is true of the whole Bible, right? And when we come back, when I show you the chiasm next week, I'll talk about, what are the things that I learned from comparing and contrasting certain parts of the Sermon on the Mount that I wouldn't think to compare and contrast if I didn't recognize the chiastic structure of the way that Matthew has presented Jesus' sermon to us. And it just adds another layer. It gives us just that much more to meditate on and to think about. And so, if you appreciate that stuff, that's wonderful. I invite you to do the same and dig into the text. If this is overwhelming for you, please don't feel under any condemnation for not wanting to do that, and just listening to other people, like myself included, kind of present these things. Think about them as you like, and if it blesses you, fantastic. And if it's not relevant to you, disregard it. It's fine. But this is what gets me excited, and so I'm just sharing it with you all, because this is part of what makes it fun for me to really dive in and study the scriptures. So So, all that to say, the reason I'm covering the last half of 6 and the first half of 7 tonight is because I think they actually fit together as one piece that mirrors a piece that we studied earlier in Matthew chapter 5. But if you want to know how, I'll leave you a whole week to think about how it's connected, and then next week when we come back, God willing, I'll show you guys my outline and how I think all of this one long message fits together into a singular whole that's saying something amazing about what it means to live in this kingdom that Christ is bringing. So we left off looking at what I think is the centerpiece, which is talking about giving and prayer and fasting, and finished off at verse 18. And after studying this week, I kind of wish I'd gone just a few more verses. We're going to pick up tonight in chapter 6, verse 19, where it says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And I'll stop right there. The reason why I wish I had included that last time is I really see that as book ending, sort of bracketing this whole section that I just taught on last time that started with the beginning of chapter 6. So chapter 6, verse 1, where it says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven." And maybe you can see the connection there. So Jesus starts off this teaching on giving, on prayer and fasting, beginning with talking about, think about the reason, your motivation. What's the reward you're seeking when you do these things? And check yourself about that. Is it from, and we talked about this last time, are you seeking a reward that's a worldly desire to simply be applauded, to be respected and honored by people? Or are you seeking something more spiritual? Are you seeking to emulate the goodness and generosity that you've experienced from the Father? Are you seeking to have a closer relationship with Him? Are you seeking to walk in a way that is pleasing to Him rather than a way that's simply pleasing to people? Check that. Check what kind of reward you're looking at. And so that it makes sense that he would then conclude that whole section with, it comes down to, are you looking for earthly reward or heavenly reward? And then connecting that with our heart, which, as I said last time, I think that's at the center. The heart is at the center of what all of last week's teaching was about, and what we seek after and what we want most is saying so much about what's in our heart. And Yeshua, Jesus, is inviting us into to have a different kind of heart than maybe what we had before we met Him. So then moving on from there, verse 22. So here's where we're really picking up this new section that parallels an earlier section. So he says, "The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." So it can be really easy when we read this and we don't catch the nuance in the original language and understand the culture that was present that Yeshua is speaking to. Because he's not just speaking to the air, even though these words were preserved and intended for us today to read, to meditate on, to learn and grow from. They had to make sense to the people that were there at the moment they were being said, and they had this gospel that Matthew wrote had to make sense to the first people who were reading it. Or if it made no, didn't make sense, nobody would have bothered remembering it. Nobody would have bothered recording it and preserving it and rereading it and studying it for centuries and centuries and centuries. So this means something. And this can come off almost as random sayings by Jesus, right? What is eyes being the lamp of the body? What does that even mean? What does that have to do with serving two masters? What is it that Jesus is saying here? Well, first, it's helpful to understand when talking about this. There's this I language, and I language is going to be a theme for a little while here, even further on into chapter 7. So it's important to understand that in Eastern culture, there's an idiom around having a good eye or a bad eye. And what that idiom meant, so someone who had a good eye sees the best. They see the good. And someone who has a bad eye has an eye that always looks first for the bad, looks first for what's wrong with something. And a bad eye sees what's lacking. A bad eye sees, danger. A bad eye, seeks to see the worst in everyone and everything around them. Whereas a good eye is just the opposite of that. A good eye is seeing the best. A good eye is seeing the abundance around them. A good eye is seeing the potential in the people and the things around them. And that's, when you understand that, then it's starting to make a little bit more sense to us. But what is the point that Yeshua is trying to make with this statement in verses 22 and 23? So it's also interesting that he says, so like the eye is the lamp of the body. So that being true, if what you look for in life is actually the lamp of your inner being, of your personhood, that makes sense, right? Somebody who has a cynical eye, someone who looks for the worst, what do you expect that they find as they look around? They look for the worst in people and in their situation, they find it. Whereas people who look for the best in others and in the world around them often find good things. So it makes sense that this has the potential to be a light, something that shines, that causes what does a lamp do, right? It uncovers what's around you. When you bring light into a dark room, it uncovers what was always there that you couldn't see until the light shone on it. And so this is a very Hebrew idea that our eyes are doing that for us to the world all the time. Our eyes are uncovering things around us. Now, he's making a distinction between eyes that are primarily seeking to uncover the bad versus uncover the good that's around us. And he says that the good eye, he says, is healthy. And I'm reading from the ESV translation, and other translations might have a different word there. The Greek word can absolutely mean healthy, but it can also mean generous. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about an eye that's looking and seeing the positive around them is going to lead to a person who is generous, who sees, I might be jumping ahead of myself and why that makes sense. But let's just keep that in mind, that a good eye can be an eye that's generous. And it leads to a person who is full of light. But when our eye is bad, and again, that Greek word that's bad could also mean stingy, when we don't have a generous eye, our whole body will be full of darkness. And so then if the thing that's supposed to bring light into your body is actually dark, then you're totally dark inside, is what he's saying. And then he goes on to say, no one can serve two masters, because he'll hate one and love the other. Now, what in the world does that have to do with having a good eye or a bad eye? Well, at the end he says you can't serve. So, because we might be questioning, well, what are the two masters he's talking about? God and money. And now here's where the idea of generosity comes into play. And now this is all beginning to click together and make sense. Because an eye, or we'll say, we don't talk that way in English, say an attitude, someone who operates out of a spirit of generosity and of seeing the good. Maybe we'd call that person optimistic, having an optimistic attitude about the people and the world around them, is much more likely to not self-protect, to not withhold, whether that be money, which is specifically, and possessions, which is specifically what Jesus is talking about here, but also to, we can, someone like that is less likely to withhold their trust in others, their affection, their attention, right? Versus someone who sees the bad, who's seeing the faults in those around them, who's suspicious of others and their motivations, is much more likely to withhold everything, to hold tight to their resources, to their possessions, their money, hold tight to their trust, hold tight to their, reaching out for human connection and relationship. It's somebody who's constantly in this shell, this self-protected state. And if you have a cynical attitude about other people in the world, of course you're going to protect. If you can't trust people, and ultimately you can't trust God. And that's Jesus connecting this idea, the same thing. Someone who has a negative attitude means they don't really believe that the world God made is good. They don't really believe that God has good in store for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And so they feel like it's up to them to protect themselves. And so what's the false god that all of us are so tempted to turn to when we don't trust God and we want to protect ourselves? We turn to money. If I have enough money, I'll be okay. If I only had enough money, I would be secure. I'd be healthy. I could always afford to go to the doctor if I needed to. I have all the things that I need, and I need to protect that money. And I can't give it to this other person, because who knows if they're trustworthy or not, what they'll do with it. And if I give to them, there won't be enough left for me. A bad eye sees scarcity all around them. They see lack everywhere. And so they've got to protect whatever abundance they might have from the gaping void around them that wants to suck it away. And Yeshua compares that to serving money as a god. Money's become your master, and it makes sense, because if your number one priority and goal is to have money and protect that money so that you can feel safe and secure, it does become your master, because the things that you do to serve that bank account or that income stream that you have, and to protect it at all costs. And oh my goodness, Christians are not immune to this by any stretch of the imagination. It can be so easy to fall back, and especially if you live in a culture or a context where the economy of your country is such that most people have a high standard of living and are well off, or at least most people aren't starving in your country. It can be very easy to become accustomed to economic prosperity, and very easy for that prosperity to become your God, and you don't even realize it until it's threatened. Until the Lord asks you to give generously. Until maybe the economy starts to take a turn, and then suddenly your whole world is turned upside down because your income stream is threatened, as if that's the most important thing. And I live in the United States, and it's for the most part, very prosperous country, and so I include myself in that camp as one that I have to constantly be reminded. This is why being in Scripture every day is so important. I need to be constantly reminded, though I'm thankful for the things that I have, they are not my God, and they cannot be allowed to control me. And even if it means that I intentionally put myself in positions where I could lose all of it, for the sake of being obedient to God, for the sake of loving him and loving others. And that's a struggle. But one that's worth, it's a struggle that's worth it. So Yeshua goes on from there, and I don't think this is disconnected at all from what he's just said. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you'll eat or what you'll drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more value than they? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? And I'll stop there. So you see, and this has been such a profound experience for me in studying the Sermon on the Mount and going over it, because I'd always heard it taught as if these are all a bunch of, not random, but a bunch of collection of Jesus's teachings on a variety of unrelated things, and it's just like, boom, here's some teaching on this, here's some teaching on this, here's some teaching on this, and that there wasn't necessarily any thread or flow of one thing to the other, that they were not that they were disconnected, these things that Christ is talking about in this sermon. And I've come to see that it's actually one thing leads to the next, they're all actually connected very tightly. And if having the right attitude about, the right perspective on the world and on yourself, and not having that perspective leads to a desire to protect your resources at the cost of being generous to others. It makes sense that then he would address, well, what's the root cause? Why do we allow money to be our master and to be our God? Well, obviously it's because we have anxiety around that. We're anxious, we worry. And we worry because, feeding back to what we just looked at, because we have the wrong perspective on the world. We don't see the world the way God sees it. We see it in a different light than him, in a light that's actually no light at all. It's darkness. And so, of course, if we see scarcity all around us, if we see lack all around us in the world and in the people around us, then whatever we have, we're going to hold on to, and we're going to worry about protecting it, holding on to it, getting more of it, stockpiling it. Oh my goodness, it's so crazy to watch this year, the things that people have stockpiled because of this pandemic, and their worry, their anxiety about, what if I don't have toilet paper, as if humans never existed, weren't able to live or exist without toilet paper. And I'm not saying that toilet paper isn't great to have for cultures that use it, but that's not the most important thing, and it's not what we should be worrying about, especially as Christ followers. And so, and I think that it's easy to see that what Christ is saying is not that these things don't matter. He's not rebuking us for having clothing, for having food and drink, for having a place to live. He simply says you've made a mistake when seeking after these things and protecting these things is the priority in your life. That's what drives you. That's what's motivating you, and it puts you into a heart attitude and a spirit that is going to make it really difficult for God's kingdom to come through you and touch the people around you and speak to the people around you. Remember what we started off in the very beginning of this message in Matthew chapter 5, that the thing that Christ is asking of his disciples is to be the light his light in the world, to be the salt of the earth, with the purpose that people that are outside the kingdom would see the good deeds of Christ's disciples and give glory to God the Father. How are they going to do that if we're so busy huddled up and protecting ourselves that we're unable, our hands are tied, we're unable to reach out with generous love to those around us? And so it comes down to then, why are we so anxious? And I think Yeshua's pointing that out for us in this passage, where he says, are you not more value than they? Why is he asking that? Because he's touching the lie that we've believed that causes us to have this anxiety, the lie that God doesn't really care about us, that we don't matter to him, we don't have any significance to him. And so he says, look, the birds, the flowers are so significant to God that he hasn't forgotten about them. He hasn't forgotten what they need. And he's created a world that sustains them and provides for them the things that they need. And so do we really believe that we have less value than these things? That God has not actually created a world that has enough in it to sustain us and to provide for our needs and to take care of us? You notice he still says that he acknowledges that we need them. But his point is that do we trust God to provide these things for us when we give generously to those who might be in greater need than we are? So he goes on to say then in verse 31, therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? And these are the words of someone who feels that they're being prompted, I think, by God to give generously. And they're having this family meeting. Well, man, but if I do that, if I go and drop off these things that maybe God's speaking in my heart and asking me to go and give to these people, whether they're refugees, whether they're the poor, whether it's just my neighbor who's having a hard time. But then we want to say, but what about me? But what about me? If I give, who's going to take care of me? If I take care of others, if I take care of the poor, the orphan, the widow, the foreigner, who's going to take care of me? And that's what he's getting at. That's the heart. He says, for the Gentiles seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. Everybody wants these things, and God knows. He knows we need them. So who's going to take care of you? Your heavenly Father, of course. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore, do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. If we have enough to get through today, we don't need to worry about, well, if I give this today, what will I have tomorrow? If I give my excess, if I give tomorrow's bread to my neighbor today, what will I eat tomorrow? And he's exposing that when we think like that, we are not trusting the love and the provision of God for us. We're not trusting God. We don't actually believe that he's good, which, man, this is so foundational. This goes all the way back to the first pages of Genesis, and the lie that the serpent told to the man and the woman in the garden, which was ultimately, it came down to this thing right here. Do you really trust God? Do you really believe that he's good and that his intentions for you are good? Doesn't it make more sense that he's holding back from you? That he doesn't want what's best for you? That he's lied to you? That's ultimately was the trap. That was the snare of the serpent in the garden. And we still struggle with those lies and believing those lies, that God isn't really good, that he's not really for us, and he's not going to take care of us. he doesn't really care about us. Maybe even the opposite. That's a lie. And we have to have those lies exposed and confronted, and we have to reject them. We have to reject the lie. He then moves on in verse 1 of chapter 7. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is holy, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, lest they trample them underfoot and turn to attack you. Okay, again, this can seem like random sayings from Jesus. What does this have to do with anything? It's so connected to everything we've been talking about tonight. Because, of course, if we have anxiety around that no one's going to take care of us, so we've got to put ourselves first and take care of ourselves first. If we see scarcity and fault in everything around us, of course, we're going to be the type of person that is judging others. Now, this is one of those verses, judge not lest ye be judged, that gets so misused within and without, inside and outside the church, inside and outside the body of Christ. So let's talk for just a moment, some context here. What is Christ talking about? Well, there's different kinds of judgment, first of all, and he's clearly not making a blanket statement that covers every kind of judgment. One type of judgment that this word could be used for is the type of judgment that happens in a civil court. In other words, if you break the law and you're taken to court and you have to stand trial before a judge, there's that, and then the judge hears your case and gives an outcome, a judgment, a resolution to the case. He's clearly not talking about that kind of judgment. He's clearly not saying, if you're a follower of Yeshua, you're not allowed to serve as a judge in a court because that's somehow wrong and immoral. No, obviously not at all. That's not the kind of judgment. There's also the kind of judgment that we do every day, that another word we use in English is discernment. We are deciding, we are judging between a good decision and a bad decision, something that's beneficial and something that's not beneficial, something that's functional and dysfunctional, between light and darkness, that dividing between good and bad. That kind of judgment also, I think, is not at all what Jesus is talking about in this passage. That's if we don't use discernment, first of all, it would contradict so many other things in the scriptures. But how would we even be able to function? We need to be able to discern. And in fact, he encourages us later on in this same sermon to judge the fruit in others' lives. So what is he talking about here? What kind of judgment is there? Well, there's another type of judgment, which is the judgment that this is the word that would be used when they would bring a sacrifice to the priest. And the priest's responsibility would be to judge, because maybe you're a poor family, and you've brought your lamb or other animal for the sacrifice, which is your obligation, but you're really hungry and you want to actually eat that animal, and so you can redeem the animal. You acknowledge that it belongs to God, you've offered it as a sacrifice, but you want to redeem it back from the Lord, and so you pay its monetary value to the priest, and you can take your animal home and eat it. And so the priest then had to judge what the value of that animal was. If it was, how healthy it was, if there were any blemishes on it, they had to examine all of those things. They had to, it's basically talking about placing a value judgment on something. And that makes a lot of sense as the thing that we are not supposed to be doing when it comes to other people. We can judge someone's actions as being good or bad, harmful or beneficial. That's fine. But we are not allowed to judge the value of that person in society, in God's eyes, as a human being. There's only one being in the universe that gets to sit on a throne and judge the value of any human life. And that is the Creator, God himself. But so often it's so easy for us when we have a heart that is consumed by anxiety and worry, when we have an eye that's constantly seeing the bad all around us, to then take that further step and assigning value to the people around us and saying that person is. How many times have you thought or said, that person's worthless? Oh, the world would be better off without that person. For whatever reason, no matter what they've done, to have that kind of thought. And that's the attitude that I believe Christ is addressing here in the beginning of Matthew 7, and saying that no, you have no place pronouncing that kind of judgment. And he says, and he goes back, he connects it. It's coming full circle. He's talking again about eyes then. He's not pulling that analogy out of thin air. He's coming back to that same thing that he started this section with, and talking about the eye being the lamp of the body. And he says, when you're placing that kind of value in someone, and you're seeing, because of whatever negative thing you see in that person's eye, which, in this analogy that Christ uses, is just a speck in their eye that's affecting how they see the world. You've got a log in your eye. What another way to say you've got a bad eye, right? An eye that's dark, an eye that light can't come in, because you have such a dark view of others and of the world. And I think of yourself, I just personally speaking, I find that when I look at the things that I'm suspicious of in other people, it often says more about what's in my heart than what's in theirs. And so he says you can't do that. You're being a hypocrite. And again, hypocrite, remember from last time, it's not someone who says something and does another. It's someone who's just putting on a performance. It's an actor. So don't be an actor. Don't, when you go around judging other people and telling them why they're worth less than you or someone else, and putting yourself in that place of God. You are playing a part, and you are playing a role as an actor that you have no business playing. You're playing the part of God. That's what I think he's saying here. He says, when you take that log out of the eye, you'll be able to clearly see what's going on in that person. And I don't think it means that you'll be able to see, oh yeah, that to take that speck out of your brother's eye as if he's so in the wrong. But now you're able to actually love them and care for them because you see what's good in them. That your desire to remove that speck or that small deficiency in their worldview is motivated from a place of how God values them and loves them. And you want them to experience shalom. You want them to experience wholeness, peace with themselves and God, because God loves them, and God's assigned a value to them that no one else can contradict. And so then he ends this with, at least this statement then, with don't give dogs what's holy, and don't throw pearls before pigs. And again, this can seem, what in the world does this have to do with anything? And often this is a verse that gets pulled out from the context of this message and used in various ways, but clearly it must, whatever he's talking about, must have something to do with what he just said, having to do with placing a value judgment on other people, and going around with a huge log, darkening our own eyes, giving us bad eyes, stingy eyes, and wanting to go around and point out the lack of generosity in others by helping them with their speck. It's helpful to know that this term dog and also pig were colorful ways that the Jewish people in this time period referred to Gentiles. And we hear that and we're like, oh, why did they do that? And why is Jesus using that kind of language? I think he's using that kind of language because he's actually highlighting that the fact that they call others from the communities and cultures that surrounded them gave them these kinds of labels, comparing them to dogs and pigs, unclean, says a lot about their bad eye and about how the log that is in theirs. And when it talks about, casting pearls, this is a very Hebrew idiom that had to do with when people studied the scriptures. When you uncover something, I often use the term, like when I say, "Oh, I found this great nugget, like of amazing truth. So I struck gold." Right? Well, the rabbis would call those things pearls. When you notice something profound in the text, and it moves you, and you see that, wow, this is something this is a treasure that's worth reflecting on and meditating on and finding how to apply that and walk that out in my life. That's called a pearl. And when you began to see how different pearls in different passages in Scripture were connected, and I've often used this term hyperlinking, that I totally stole from Tim Mackey and that he stole from another friend of his. That was the rabbis called that stringing pearls together. You were stringing your pearls together. You were connecting all these dots, these treasures that are sprinkled throughout the Scripture. And so when he's saying, don't take these pearls, don't take what's holy and throw them before dogs and pigs, he's critiquing them of their habit that they often, when they looked at the Gentile communities around them, they said, they would throw out these deep teachings from the Torah, which the Gentile people around had no context for understanding it, for having it make sense to them, and they judged them for the fact that they ate pigs, right? The people, and remember, there are people watching this sermon who had come up from the Decapolis, so pig-eating Gentiles were listening in on this teaching, and they knew that they were being constantly judged because they were eating unclean animals. But why should they be? How should they be able to understand that? The Gentiles never signed up to eat kosher. They weren't there at Sinai. Representatives of their nations weren't there at Sinai signing up saying, yeah, we're going to eat this way and we're going to live this way. They don't understand any of the covenant. And so to judge them for breaking a covenant that they never signed up for, and therefore to value them less as people, and to distance yourself from them relationally, it is, not only is it wrong, but don't be surprised when these same people, not only can they not accept your teaching because they have no context for it, and you haven't made an on-ramp for them, you haven't opened a door for them to come in and even begin to learn these things. Don't be surprised when they turn on you, when they trample you underfoot also, not just your teaching, because you come off as a rude jerk. When you're valuing people less and valuing them that way unfairly. I hope that brings some context to that. So then here's the passage that we're going to end tonight with. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks it will be opened. Or which one of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? So, whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Okay. And so, is this connected at all to what we're saying, or is this something completely different? I feel like he's just drilling deeper into our own wicked, broken hearts and the reasons why we do the messed up things we do. Why is it that we're so suspicious of others? Why is it that we value others less and we judge them and we withhold? What would be the opposite of that? What would it look like to have someone who was in the wrong before us, and instead of judging them, to do the opposite? And I think if we've been paying attention at all to this sermon, there's a clear theme of loving our enemies and of forgiving those who have hurt us. And so what's the reason we don't forgive? Well, one of the reasons I think he's saying here, 'cause why does he suddenly shift from talking about, the value judgments that we put on people that alienate them from us and us from them? Why does he go from that to, again, talking about prayer and a specific way of praying, actually, which I'll talk to in a moment? How is he able to slide over to that and still be talking about the same thing? And I think it's because he's hitting at one of the core reasons why we judge and don't want to forgive. And it's because we believe if we forgive them for what they've done against us, then they won't get what they deserve. That we think it's actually our job to vindicate ourselves. It's our job to repay for what's been done. And we're afraid to trust God and trust God's justice and his judgment for that person. And it could be because we think that God is just going to let it go, and they're going to get away with it. Or it could be we're like Jonah, and we're actually afraid if we trust God to judge these people, they might repent and they might receive mercy, and then again they're going to get away with it. And we don't want our enemies to get God's mercy. That was Jonah's beef with God. That's his whole reason he ran away in the beginning of the story. And so, are we willing to take our struggles and our doubts and our mistrust about the world around us and other people? Are we willing to take all the logs that cause us to have a bad eye, to take those things out and give them to God, and to trust God with these things, and trust that he will do what's right with all of us, with my life, with their life, with everyone? Will I trust him? And the ESV doesn't quite capture, I think, the tense right of the ask, the knock, the ask, the seek, and the knock. Other translations, I think that the New Living Translation, ironically, which is, I think, a paraphrase, gets closer to what's being said here in the Greek, at least. It's not just like, ask once and it will be given to you. If you just try seeking one time, you'll find. If you just knock once, it says asking and keep asking. Seek and keep seeking. Knock and keep knocking. In other words, keep asking until you get your answer. Keep seeking until you find that thing that you're looking for from God. Keep knocking until that door opens to you. It's an exhortation. It's an encouragement to persist in trusting God. This is an invitation into a lifestyle of every day risking by trusting God, trusting in his goodness, trusting in his provision. See, this is totally in theme with all that he's been talking about for the last 2 chapters. And again, he compares, exposes the lie, again, that we think when we don't do that, when we don't trust God, it's because there's a part of us that's believed the lie that God's not actually good. And that's why he says, which of you, if if his son asked him for bread, would give him a stone, if a fish for a serpent? Clearly, it's ridiculous. No sane father would do that. And so if you, who are evil, well, he's talking to us, if you know how to give good gifts, how much more will your Father who's in heaven give good things to those who ask him? The truth is that God's good, and if we would only trust him, we'd find out how good. If we would only ask him, we'd find out how generous he is. If we'd only seek him, we'd find how eager he is to be with us. If we would only knock, we would find out how welcome we are with him and in his kingdom. And so then he ends, and I put verse 12 there as kind of the ending thing, because he started this whole section of talking of what it means to interpret Torah rightly and what it means to walk out Torah rightly, with saying, I didn't come to abolish the law and the prophets, right? I came to fulfill them. I came to walk them out in front of you. I came to expose what it really means to know the Torah and to walk the Torah. And so then he ends this whole section, bigger section, in verse 12 with, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, you do also for them. And this is the Torah and the prophets. This is what the whole scripture is inviting all of us to do. So amazing, right? So I'm going to end there. And then next time, my hope is then we're going to finish chapter 7, which isn't too much more, and then spend the rest of the time just talking about all of 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to summarize it all up again. I'll show you guys the outline I've been working on it, and then we're going to compare all that we've read in 5, 6, and 7, and how the different sections of the Sermon on the Mount work together to emphasize and highlight what I believe is the main message, the big idea that Yeshua, our Messiah, is trying to say to us in this sermon. So that's for next time. So thankful for y'all joining. If this teaching is helpful at all to you, please like, please share, subscribe for more teachings. I do this because I'm passionate about the scriptures. I feel like there's so much life for us that God wants to invite us into as we read and study these texts. And so I want to share that with as many people, encourage as many people as possible to dive into this book, to live in this book and live it out outside your, go in your study and study it, but then go out the door and walk it out before people. Let them see the changed life that God is performing in you and in your heart. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Abba, I thank you again for such amazing teaching, and I'm not talking about my interpretation of it. I'm just speaking about the basic text of Matthew 5, 6, and 7. It is profoundly affecting my life, how I see myself, how I see others, and how I see you more clearly the more I study these words. Father, I just pray for your Holy Spirit to teach, to lead, to guide us, God, into all truth and all understanding. Show us, speak to us. How can we walk this out in our own lives practically? How can I, in the way that I love my wife, my children, how I love my neighbors, and how I love my strangers, how I love my enemies, how I walk and live my life in this world, God, let it be impacted by the things I am reading and studying in your word, God. Show me how to do that. We need your help. Father, I pray for all those who are seeking, all those who are asking, all those who are knocking, God, and they haven't found yet the thing that they are looking for, God. I just pray that you would come alongside them and that you would empower them, God, not to give up, to persist and to persist and to persist, to hunger and thirst for your righteousness, God, for your justice, and not to give up, God. Give them endurance, Lord. I ask that in Yeshua's name. Amen and amen. So good to be with you all again. And remember, I'll be back live this Tuesday night for some Q&A time around this section of Matthew's Gospel. Until then.